topic is attack path modeling, the key to vulnerability risk management at scale. Speaking today is Tony Taylor, a solutions architect with Vulcan Cyber. I have a really long bio, but he just said he's a nerd that's been around town for a while. So I'll let him take it from here.
Thank you. How's everybody doing? Is this the last session before people get free drinks? So like hurry up, get the hell out of here. Awesome. So again, my name is Tony Taylor. Been around town for, I don't know, better part of 20 years or so. I've worked with a lot of folks here in the community, worked for some of the folks here in the community. I'll probably never get that part of my life back. But, so from a technology perspective, wanted to kind of talk about attack path modeling. What does this actually mean? I guess it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. In my case, working kind of in the vulnerability risk management space, what does it mean to be prepared and model either offensively or defensively kind of the attack scope and being able to prevent that. So I figured I would start maybe with a little story and kind of take that into more of a different context. A lot of people know I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, and I mean, don't kill me for that. I'm also a Texans fan. I would love nothing more than kind of the Houston and Dallas Super Bowl. I don't think we're really going to see that anytime soon, but we can continue to dream. So if you're thinking about attack path modeling in that context, and you think about what Dan Quinn has to do when he's preparing his playbook for all of the things from a defensive strategy perspective, what are they doing? They're researching, they're pulling data, watching film, studying player interactions, looking for details that they can use to help build that strategy such that they're going to be as efficient and as effective as possible to reach their goal. In that case, we'll use the Texans in the analogy to get to C.J. Stroud, keep them from scoring themselves in the case in that matter. So that attack path model requires understanding all of that contextual data, using all that to enrich your playbook, and being able to hopefully align yourself such that you can efficiently deliver what it is that you're doing from that playbook's perspective. So in this case, score from attack perspective. You could flip that around and take that into the offensive playbook strategy. What are they doing on the other side? Take it into any other kind of scenario. But attack path model in this case, conceptually, is understanding what do you need to do, how do you prioritize those things, what is the context and things that you can do to enrich that model and be able to appropriate your plan and playbook such that you're as successful and efficient as you can be. Again, Tony Taylor, been around the town for a while in various capacities. Spent some time kind of network security operations, 20 years on the customer side, so I lived on that side of the desk. I understand, fortunately, unfortunately, had the opportunity to kind of live in that space. And I've been in sales 12, 13 years now, getting to walk into various opportunities with different customers and things and looking at all the problems and understanding that. So I figured after that story, kind of take us into what I'm doing today. I can't be product focused, so I'm being more conceptual in the conversation. So understanding what it is. I think if you look at some of the stats, and some of these are up here on the screen today, if you're looking from an attack path perspective, or just a vulnerability risk management perspective in general, you can see that well over 50% of that data is typically backlogged. I mean, people can't get to the problems that they need to get to today. So you need to be able to work through all of that, all of those tools that you're getting. So from an infrastructure scanning tool perspective, or some AppSec scanning tool perspective, all of that feedback that's coming in from those tools is paramount to making smart decisions and being efficient at what you're trying to do when you're modeling your playbook to be either kind of red team or blue team, depending upon what it is that you might be doing. So as you can see, a large portion of that data is something that is backlogged. People never get to it. Everything's critical, nothing's critical. Golden Gate Bridge, whatever analogy you want to use. Just oftentimes it's not realistic for teams to get to those problems. You can see also here some of the time spent just generally doing the things that they need to do. You spend a lot of time not only receiving all of that data in from those tools, but curating the response to that, understanding what it means. You spend a lot of time just working on trying to put together collaboration and an opportunity to help orchestrate the whole workflow from that. And of course, I think this last one we probably all have dealt with in some degree. You spend a lot of time preparing for the actions that you need to do. You put together all of the plans in place, You stop maybe production, if it's something in a critical infrastructure scenario, maybe they do a turn down. You've done a lot by taking a line of business offline to only find out that whatever it is you did didn't work. So being not only confident, but assuring yourself and your team that that success is going to be there once you're done, because it's likely you're not going to get to do that again at that particular moment. So I don't know if you guys look at POMA, but they have a bunch of industry stats that you can pull together and pull some of that data down. So continuing on to that same kind of concept, thinking about the factors of scale when you're looking at these problems in place. So the more tools you add, the more vulnerabilities you're going to have, the more critical components to it, and of course the more stakeholders that you're going to have to deal with. So as you step through all that, the more tools you add, the more problems you're going to produce, the more work that it comes out of that. So you've got to have a way to start understanding and model being efficient with the data that you're pulling together from that perspective. It is a massive scale. If you've ever seen vulnerability data coming in from various tools, it's thousands, hundreds of thousands of things that are thrown at you. And likely a lot of that stuff's not really impactful. So being able to prioritize that's key. So you can look at here at some of the tools that are coming in. I won't go into the specifics of all of these, but different sectors of the business are using the ASPMs and the CASMs and things like that to glean context out of their respective spaces. And somewhere in that middle is the sweet spot that you've got to use to kind of boil all that down and understand where the value is, that where does it lie. I mean, you could take any one of these tools and probably pull the data out off of that, and then find some very specific things that help you understand not only criticality, potential impact, value, all of the things from a business perspective that you need to ask. I mean, me as a nerd, I lived on that side of the desk, and I was the one looking up into the mountain of data that you had to go, the work in front of you. But likely with that same set of data, being able to flip that around and look more top-down from a macro level, maybe your line of business or management or whatever, you have to answer a different set of questions. But being able to utilize the same set of data is hugely valuable across an organization. All of these tools are providing great feedback to be able to have that opportunity. Again, it's kind of the attack path modeling, whether you're defending it or maybe the other side of that. Some things from, I don't know if you guys read Forrester or any of the industry rags that are out today. Forrester just came out with a recent wave. There were a couple of, specifically in vulnerability management, there were a couple of people that kind of shine in that space, but the story stayed relatively the same. I think if you look at the data that's coming out of this, these 4 or 5 bullets here are, you can walk around outside and these bullets just are blasting all over every backdrop behind every table out there. You've got to prioritize and be able to have visibility to all of your assets. You have to understand what it is that you need to protect. Can't protect what you can't see, all those analogies come into play. You've got to be able to prioritize the remediation. Again, there's too much work out there to get done. There's only so many hours in a day. I know you always tell your boss, well, I've got nights and weekends. Everybody wants to do their work then. So prioritization is super, super valuable, and being able to make sure that you're as effective as possible and being able to deliver that. The remediation response, I think, back to the massive scale that comes along with this. The more problems you produce, the more work. You've got to understand what that capability is on the back end to actually get the work done. I mean, you can produce all the work out there, but if you can't get it done, then you're not being really effective with your program. So back to, how are you going to model that data set along the way? And I think, being innovative. Every tool out there has shortcomings. No tool is perfect. So understanding how to work around those and shore that gap up efficiently and effectively is something that's hugely valuable. I'm not big really on rags, but this stuff sells stuff. So Forrester Wave, an example, is pretty good to get some data out. I guess honestly, if you look at these particular scenarios, these are your business leaders that are out there that are giving that feedback directly to the industry on where they're aligning, what they're wanting to do. So just highlighting some of the things that people are looking for as they're setting their plan up, and right smack dab in the middle is attack path modeling. All of these pieces here are equally as important. I think, at least in my opinion, they probably overlap in a lot of cases. So that attack path modeling, understanding the relational data, understanding the priority, understanding the criticality, the value becomes super important to driving that efficiently. I'm going to get through this quick, aren't I? Just burning it out. So what are the 5 problems that I wanted to talk about? So we probably hear this often. Dirty data is huge. You get a ton of data in. Being able to contextualize that and enrich that is super important. You've got to clean up your data such that you're able to use the bits that you need and kind of set the other stuff aside and kind of move the noise out, if that makes sense. Oftentimes, if you're getting tons of data fed at you and without any context, it becomes difficult to find to utilize that in any effective manner, because you need to know the bits that are valuable to you. It could be any component of that, if it's asset ownership or business impact criticality. All of those tools have the opportunity to plug a lot of that detail in. So being able to enrich that is super important. Ownership, I think that goes without saying. I don't know how many of you have sat in rooms with management and had that conversation collectively across your team that you're asking your business owners, well, what's most important? If this goes out, who do we call first? What is the value of this line of business or this particular service or this location? I mean, that conversation is often a difficult conversation to have, relatively circular a lot of times. So asset ownership and that's a key component in being able to model an effective program and understanding what that is. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the mitigation efforts. Not only do you need to have the capacity and capability in the teams to be able to deliver the work, but you have to be confident and understand that it's, or at least have some capability to feel that it's going to be successful. And I think the blind spots go without saying. Back to the front end of that, you can't protect what you can't see. If you don't have any capability to understand that it's there, it becomes very difficult to build a model and approach to be able to plan to either defend and/or, in the case if you're on the red side, attack it. So how do we fix those things? So correlation is key. So again, all of those tools are providing extreme opportunity to be able to add additional context to it. Whether it's your traditional infrastructure scanner tools, the big three that are out there, we can name any one of them, it's providing great data back to be able to understand the risk disposition of whatever line of business, whatever service, whatever application, whatever infrastructure. Lots of kind of nitty-gritty details that you can use. You take that, couple that with an EDR tool, now you've got even deeper depth into a particular asset as an example, or you take that, if I strip it down and I say, this website's running this particular piece of code, it's probably running in this container up in this cloud environment, and it's stacked up on this traditional host infrastructure. That one line of business is a collection of components that are likely different teams, different tools, different objectives within an organization. So understanding that context is huge. So being able to correlate that relational data is super important. Lots of tools out there that provide the data, so being able to utilize that is hugely important. Enrich it with intelligence. And I look at this a couple of different ways. There's tons of information internally, that inside looking out, that brings value to understanding the nature and disposition of an asset or a set of assets or a line of business. It could be a bunch of location-based, revenue-based, whatever it is. So you have the opportunity to use that. A lot of teams don't. Even the most mature enterprise organizations do not do a good job of using that internal business context. So, if it's plugging into a Tenable or some GitHub tool or AWS, each one of those teams have an opportunity to tag that data and add additional context. That enrichment's huge. Now, that's the inside looking out. That's the piece that none of us as vendors can provide to most organizations. That's something that has to come from within inside. So being able to create that, that environment that promotes that and continues to move that forward is super, super valuable. So definitely do that in your tools. Then there's the outside looking in piece, the enrichment. So that's all of the feedback that you're getting from the attack surface management tools, any kind of traditional infrastructure scanners, any software scanning tool, web application. Trying to stay away from acronyms. You're scanning a piece of code, you get a disposition back, you understand the kind of the package load that's in there. This package is vulnerable to XYZ, but team A only owns this particular function of that code. So you have to be, all of that enrichment is hugely valuable to be able to be efficient and delivering that work back to them. Once you get to that point, you're able to start prioritizing things. I know the criticality, I know the ownership, not only the ownership on the line of business top-down macro side, but also the ownership from the bottom-up nerd side, who has to go fix these things, the remediation owners, as the industry calls us. So once you get to the point of being able to prioritize that stuff, you now can be laser-focused in delivering right tool, right team, right time, right context to deliver something into maybe a Jira or ServiceNow ticket to go fix XYZ problem. So prioritization at this point becomes, effective, or at least you have the opportunity to do a lot of that because you've done the enrichment, you've done the correlation, you now have the opportunity to understand how this is important to us, go fix these things first. Simple example might be you've got same code running similar service, similar environment, but one's production and one's development. So likely you would want to focus on the production stuff that's revenue generating or customer facing as an example. Again, the collaboration piece, I think it goes without saying that the better opportunity to be able to communicate with the teams, at least in my experience, back in the day, I was the guy running into a room, with 500 or 1,000 page report saying, go fix this, to a bunch of developers without a lot of context. So you can imagine, probably that was not real fruitful. So collaboration is key. There are tools out there. You probably have a lot of those in your environment already. Even if it's simply email, you can deliver a very curated set of data to a team and say, go fix these things pretty effectively nowadays. And of course, I think the measure to be able to improve, it goes without saying that we've got to be able to deliver the report to the various teams, whether you're a practitioner and I'm coming in on Monday and I'm seeing the work ahead of me, and be able to report and trend on that, or bottom down into the kind of the line of business kind of executive kind of view into that data such that they can look at it. Because a lot of times, the line of business owners and stuff don't really care about the nuts and bolts. They don't care about the bits and bytes, the speeds and the feeds, all of those things. They care about, this is my line of business, this is how much value it is to me. We have this level of risk at a macro level. This team's, it's been handed to this team, it's being remediated, here's the status of it, and he can communicate that back to his business. So it's super important to be able to measure and to continually improve that. So let's talk a little bit about each one of those. So that correlation component, I think if you think about breaking down all of those those components into an application as an example, I'll talk a little bit about it. You've got this website or web service, it's got these functional blocks of code, it's running on these containers. All of that stuff comes in from all of those tools. It's likely that in most cases, at least in my experience, those teams are very siloed and they don't often talk together. So being able to pull that data in programmatically and pull that into a tool that allows you to flatten that information out such that you can utilize that is super powerful, right? This set of hosts or this host or set of hosts is running this code that's producing this thing, and it's running in this environment. It has these configuration bits from a security perspective associated with it. Each one of those pieces you can flatten out and be able to report back to the business. So it becomes super powerful from that correlation piece to understand. I mean, simple things are pulling information from host names, MAC addresses, instance IDs, cloud, there's tons of bits out there that you can use to know that this set of things is actually kind of that multi-source, single asset focused deliverable. That's hugely powerful in being able to be efficient in that whole modeling structure of that. Then, to the enrichment. I mean, tons of tools out there. I don't know, a lot of you, if you play in the kind of the threat intelligence space, there's tons of great tools that are out here on the floor as well. But there are a mountain of free tools or free feeds that are out there that provide very useful information to make smart decisions in a timely manner. CISA KEV. I know it's government provided. It is super powerful. There's lots of information that comes in the KEV, the known exploit vulnerability database, that is that you can use to enrich things. I mean, if I've got production XYZ widgets that are composed of these particular assets that are weaponized, that are have business criticality impact scores that are stop, drop, and roll perspective, that I know I want to prioritize this specific vulnerability on this thing before I do it on this other thing. So having that opportunity to enrich that data, again, both from internal and or external sources, is super powerful. Matter Attack's a great place if you're a nerd and you like to look at the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures of what people might be doing with your environment. So what is potentially impactful, and stack rank those things based on the opportunities. That becomes super important to be able to drive or deliver the right thing, right team type perspective from that attack model perspective. Matter Attack's a great, if you haven't looked at it, it's out there as well. They have not only the IT but the OT focused program and framework out there, so I encourage you to look at that as well. And again, of course, the prioritization discussion, I think, sells itself. I think once you have all of this correlation in place, You've added the additional enrichment, whether that be, again, internal or external. You now have the opportunity, as I mentioned, to prioritize. A lot of times, at least back when I was on that side of the desk again, we're told to go fix all the high and criticals, everything. It's just not realistic. It's certainly not realistic when you get into a large enterprise scenario where you're having thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of highs and critical vulnerabilities that you absolutely can't fix for many reasons. You can't fix them because you're waiting on some third party. You can't fix them because the FDA says you can't touch a tool. I mean, there's lots of reasons that you can't do things. So then you got to slide those off into some exception. They move into a different SLA lane. You still have to report on them, but it's just not realistic. So you have to understand how to prioritize, what you can prioritize, and then deliver that to the teams with the most efficient manner possible. And then, of course, the collaboration. I think that is, to me, that is paramount. At least, again, in my experience, it was often hard to have good conversation with different teams because you just didn't have the relationships. It was often very siloed. I think that's flattening out a little bit today. I think with the opportunity to bring this data in and kind of pull all that together, it moves that a layer up above the practitioners, if you will, and allows the collective organization to look at all of that risk data in kind of a holistic manner. And I think organically kind of takes some of that away, so the collaboration becomes a little bit easier because now you can plug in the tools. I've correlated it, I've enriched it, I've prioritized it. Now I can be laser focused. If this condition and this condition and this condition is met, I know that Tony's team owns this particular function of code, so deliver that in Jira XYZ project. So you kind of take a lot of that effort out of the way of trying to figure it out because you can programmatically deliver those things and be very specific on what it is that you deliver to the teams. So you're at that point, you're running something into a Jira ticket and you're pumping something into a Slack channel as an example. Those are hugely powerful. I mean, one team uses Jira and Slack, another team uses Teams and ServiceNow. So having all of those those vehicles inside of the tooling is super powerful. And of course, I think we'll go with the, if I can hit that. That was probably the animation issue there. I didn't even realize there was animation in the presentation. So measure and improve. I mean, I think this one's a big one, and oftentimes, I know I spend a lot of time doing a lot of very manual efforts to deliver data to management teams and line of business owners. That takes a lot of time. I mean, it's something it shouldn't be as difficult as it is, but it still continues to be. I think if you have all of this vast context associated with you, there are tons of tools out there today that make pretty light work of a lot of this. But having good, consistent, measurable, or repeatable type report data is super, super important. So I mean, I think all of those components built together help you build that a pretty structured attack path model, and whether that's something you're working to from a defense perspective and or a kind of an offense perspective. I don't know if you want to report so much on your offensive attack positions, but you certainly internally want to understand that stuff so that you can measure and improve and be more successful in the things that you want to deliver. So I think that's pretty much it. I'll stop and see if there's any questions or anything anybody has that they want to ask, but hopefully this was a little bit beneficial. I think if you want to talk tools, speeds, and feeds, we can do that as well. I was told not to be product specific, so I had to keep that away. So go ahead. 41. Right out here to the left. You can come out. I think we're right next to Mandy, and if they got like a big sign, we got a little sign. Stop by. Anybody else? Is it whiskey time? So question was, and tell me if I got this right. So if you don't have, let me back up here. if you don't have something that helps you correlate, as an example, if you don't have something that helps you enrich, I think if you're a nerd, you're probably doing some of this already. You're playing with microservices, you're playing with Kubernetes and various things. There's tons of freely available tools that spin up logging solutions, that spin up services that listen and capture that data, whether it be something in line and in band on a network. You're capturing data traffic, you're capturing logs. There's tons and tons of free intelligence sources out there. I think in our product, I think we plugged 15 or 20 in today. We can also bring in the commercial ones as well. But again, there's tons of information that literally, it might take you a little bit to go figure out how to, read in an XML file into some API, whatever. Outside of that, I think it's just the time spent to understand it. You already have the information internally for your internal assets. So question was, again, what do we do if we don't have some of these capabilities? And I think the simple answer is they're there. You just got to go get them. You don't have to, a lot of them you don't have to pay for, and you likely wouldn't be, and if the maturity is not in place to justify the spend. But the capabilities are there. So I would encourage you, go to Shadow Server, get on CISA's page and look at the various things that you can get from there. I mean, it's literally a JSON, a CSV that they pump out. I mean, I get CISA emails like 10 times a day of various things that are coming out. Yeah, so I mean, it's what pieces are of value to you or whoever that don't have those capabilities. It's going to take a little bit of effort from you or your team to put that vehicle in motion. But sometimes you can't spend the money, and I think we all see that a little bit in the market today. Finding budget to buy tools it's not as easy as it was a couple of years ago. But the capabilities and the feedback is there. You just got to go find it and use it. I can send some things to you that I use, just nerding out. But likely you're probably already there and you were just asking that question. Go ahead. So great question. The question was, is there an AI component into our particular product? And there's not. And there's some reasons, and we could probably have a religious argument on why you should or why you shouldn't. I think if you get to the full life cycle of automatic patching, that scares the shit out of me. So it becomes that's a different discussion. So we don't do that for a reason. I think AI becomes something that's hugely powerful in being able to quickly enumerate things, without a doubt. But if you're, from a reporting perspective specific to that, I'm not sure AI, I guess AI could, I mean, once it learns the model and things like that, you could produce some pretty predictive opportunities to make decisions. I don't know that you would want it to do anything specific other than that. But just on the data point, I wanted to touch a little bit. The value in being able, specific in our product or any kind of risk aggregation tool, to me, there's a significant value of bringing all that collected data in together, flattening it out such that regardless of who you are within the organization, you can consume it the way you need to consume it. Because if I'm a line of business owner, I don't care about, I need to go in and fix this version of SSH or this Java library. I don't care about all that. I care about here's the complete make. Here's the risk value. Here's the value that the company shares with you. Here's the risk associated with that. And these things are almost never going to see no risk. But we know who owns the fix associated with that, and where is it along in the journey of getting to the mitigated state, if you will. And I think that's very cyclic too. So to your point, question was, how do we get people to do the work? So I think, number one, you have to have you have to have the awareness. You have to understand that those things exist. And I think there's a lot of time. The question was, how do we get people to, how do we figure out what it is that we need to be focusing on other than the crown jewels? So how do we keep awareness of the things critical? Because I mean, if you're a kind of a red teamer and you're looking for that, you may be looking at that low risk stuff, but maybe it's an older whatever, but it still has mature, exploit code associated with it. So I could, if I'm targeting someone specific, I may be looking at it as a bad person specifically for that because they're not watching for it, to your point. I think awareness is key. I think you have to have the correlation in place to understand, because it's the data that allows you to do that. But it's the person that becomes it's more of an art form, from the threat hunter perspective or something like that. Because the organization says these 5 things, thou shalt not look at these 5 things. Okay, everyone's looking at those 5 things. But to your point, all of those other things are equally as important because it's likely, and we see it all the time, it's in the news all the time, someone got in through a fish tank and they stole whatever. And there's story after story after story after story of the things that are not the low-hanging fruit, that they're the things that we're forgotten about. So I think in order to highlight those things, that business context, adding things like internal business criticality is key to bubble those things up. But the flip side of that is it's just that external intelligence. It's weaponized. Oh, by the way, we have X percentage of this particular service relies on this OS or this capability or whatever, and this percentage of it's vulnerable to this bad thing out there. But I think visibility is probably key, and the rest of it's just kind of repeatability in your program's perspective. I was always a fan of publishing the biggest 10 offenders in the hallway, but I didn't ever get to do that very, very often. But it seems to drive behaviors pretty well when you continue to tell people that they're not doing the job they need to be doing. And I think with an aggregation tool, you allow the collective organization to be able to see that and make it visible. And again, I think that drives behaviors a little bit differently. So I'll go back to the fact that you've got to understand what your landscape is, and then what's priority to me may not be priority to you, but to the collective organization, if you bubble all that up, I think it becomes much more apparent on I'm a big proponent of, if you look at your risk data and you see that regardless of what it is, so it's an aggregated thing, to your point, if you see your total problems running away from the collective things that your team can fix, then you absolutely have a problem in a people, processes, and technology bucket somewhere. So being able to drill down into those lines of business, specific capabilities, you easily can back into that discussion and then, let management take care of it as an example. So hopefully I addressed that. That's kind of a squishy question because it's very subjective, what is important. That'll never happen. The internal bowling league website got hacked. Nobody uses that, but it's plugged in. You're not allowed to ask questions, Martin. He was my boss. That's why I got all this gray hair. Initial access, like that's one-on-one. Or not. I would never say that out loud. Yeah, I think it's key. I think any effective program has to have buy-in from top down. I mean, I know in sales, I get to see a lot of different organizations, a lot of different ways that they're doing their business internally, and I can tell you, everyone does it a little bit different. Some people do not have do not have the backing of their executive team, and that's a recipe for disaster. I mean, it really is. Go ahead. Please sign here. You mean pie charts and column charts? Chrome's another example of that. The question was, how do you get management to agree with your disposition? Small chunks, like baby feet. Chrome's another great example, I think, in that. You get a new Chrome vulnerability, I don't know, every 30 seconds or something, right? But 99% of them are not impactful unless you have a business service that requires, browser access that's externally available. Then those things become super important. It's impact and yeah. Again, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities out there that you may or not ever get to, but you may not need to. Did you have something? Target? Did I say that out loud? So let me see if I got the question. The question is, if you're repeatedly seeing problems in your environment and the teams that are responsible are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, how do you handle that? Is that the question? 100%. I mean, all of this data right here, one of the great tools about this output, you're not only doing the work action side and sending it to the team, that's date and time stamped. So I gave it, Tony received all these problems on Friday at whatever. He hadn't touched them for 60 days. But this is high priority to the company. Very easy to spin that into some Power BI dashboard or something, and the execs are looking at that stuff. So ideally what you want to do is build and curate your report data, your outputs to deliver to the various stakeholders specific to what your desired outcome is. I want to deliver my pretty pictures that tell my story in a specific way and then serve it to the people that you want to serve it to on purpose with a specific outcome, as the directive. As a nerd, I'm going to come in and look at the bits and bytes. I don't care as much about the trending data because I know if I'm attacking the things I need to attack, they're going to go in the direction they need to go. But the other side of that is the executives are looking at that. And I think we're seeing more and more, and to Martin's point, I think from a management perspective, they're starting to be held accountable. And you're seeing that all the time at this point. So I think that that intelligence and being super focused and delivering right stuff, right time, right team is super important, to your point. Because you can't inundate the teams with every problem. Go fix all the high criticals. It's just not reality. So, any other questions? Thanks for hanging in there with me. I appreciate it.